Good afternoon, dear guest. Welcome to the MURCIR Wednesday Talks. I'm Zuhal Mert Uzuner. I'm Director of Marmara University Research Center for International Relations, shortly MURCIR. I have been here since the last December as the director. Wednesday talks of MURCIR are major part of our activities to follow the agenda of international relations. By starting from 2020, we have a project to broadcast all our sessions online. So you may visit our YouTube account and our website for having more information about our activities. Today we have a very prominent guest speaker from Serbia, Vuksanovic. He's an associate at LSE IDEAS and senior researcher at Belgrade Center for Security Policy. He is engaged with its foreign policy research program in Belgrade Center for Security Policy. We plan to discuss today Serbia-Turkish relations, Serbian-Turkish relations, and as you know, the contemporary the days we have rising bilateral relations, and this positive atmosphere is really important for Balkan stability and peace. So today we would like to listen what are the risks and opportunities in front of us. So maybe it's time to leave the floor to our dear guest. So let's listen to his thoughts about these issues as a real expert in the field. Yes, dear Dr. Vuksanovic, welcome to MURCIR Talks again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zuhal. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Now, I think that as a starting point, I think that I can just outline some few very general remarks as part of the overall context of Serbo-Turkish relations. Now, even though in the Western policy discourse, Turkey is very frequently referred as being actually an external actor in the Balkans, we both know that this is not true, actually. Because while the smaller part of Turkish territory is in Europe, while most of it is in Asia, but that small European section of Turkish territory is actually in the Balkan Peninsula, which effectively makes Turkey a Balkan country as well. And if only a European part of Turkey were to be an independent country, just because of the size of one of the great cities of the world, Istanbul, that would make Turkey probably the second largest country of wider Southeastern European population-wise, second only to Romania. At the same time, I think that there is also another tendency that we also keep forgetting, is that we are frequently focused on the term which we all know is quite unpopular in Turkey, which is Western Balkans. Because in the policy discourse, people frequently talk, when they talk about the Balkans, they most of the time talk about ex-Yugoslavia and a little bit of Albania. But the wider Balkan, which actually involves Turkey, but also Greece, Bulgaria, and even Romania, is frequently being excluded. So Western Balkans is frequently a much more technocratic term rather than a genuinely geographical and historical term. The third point that I also think is important is that what distinguishes Turkey from actors like Russia and China is that actually Turkey is partially part of the West. It is part of the West by being a member of NATO. It is also a new membership candidate, and it has a customs union with the European Union. So it can, depending on the circumstances, it can coordinate its policies with the West occasionally. And I think that there is also a very powerful structural factor here, is that regardless of who are the elites in power in Turkey, the Balkan remains a geopolitical and geoeconomic Turkish linchpin with the rest of Europe. So I think that there is a widespread perception in the Turkish strategic community that if Turkey wants to have influence in the wider Eurasian and European geopolitics, it has to be an influential player in the Balkans. It has to have some degree of influence and some type of security perimeter in its European rear. And that, of course, means that for Turkey, Serbia inevitably has to be part of the equation by virtue of being the largest of ex-Yugoslav countries. I mean, a country which has a strategic geography because it connects the Balkan Peninsula with the wider Central Europe. And Serbs as an ethnic group populate several neighboring countries. So that means also that that's a status that probably can be matched solely by ethnic Albanians. So that means that Serbia is something of a regional hub in the Balkans that Turkey has to take into account when it comes to its regional policy. Now, of course, there is a very long historical context here. I mean, I won't talk about, of course, the Ottoman Empire. There are, of course, people who are much more qualified than I am. But of course, there is the issue of post-World War I world, where both countries became transformed. Turkey lost an empire and became a Kemalist republic, while, of course, Serbia became part of the wider South Slavic state, which very soon became known as the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and Ataturk's Turkey had very good relations. I mean, the land used by the Serbian embassy to this very day is actually a gift from Ataturk to the Yugoslav monarch from that time in Ankara. And there was even a Yugoslavian and Turkish membership in the so-called Balkan Entente in the 1934. So Turkey during this entire period acted in accordance with the famous Turkish principle, peace at home, peace in the world. Now, the Cold War era, during this time, Turkish policy in the Balkans was frequently reduced solely to the broader context of countering the Soviet threat. And this was, of course, evidenced by a failed Balkan Pact of 1953, where Yugoslavia, Greece, and Turkey participated. Of course, a pact which was broken, of course, with Greco-Turkish dispute over Cyprus and with Yugoslav rapprochement with the Soviet Union. But of course, the most important, I think, historical occurrence for the present-day environment still concerns the end of the Cold War, because I think that the breakup of Yugoslavia and Yugoslav wars were part of the wider Turkish dilemmas about what is the Turkey's role in the new post-Cold War world. And of course, we all know that with the disappearance of the Soviet Union, Turkey could no longer brag about being a Western outpost, being on the front line of a potential hot war. But still, Turkey found itself in the immediate proximity of several regional hotspots which were occurring at the same time: Middle Eastern conflict, Caucasus conflict, and the Balkan conflicts. So all of this sort of created a debate in Turkey of whether this is a source of threat to Turkey, but also whether this is a source of potential opportunities for Turkey in the post-Cold War to chart a new independent policies. Now, of course, the Bosnian War and the fact that the Bosniaks were the greatest victims of otherwise highly tragic conflict generated, of course, a lot of sympathies in Turkey for the Bosniak cause. But even then, when they backed the Bosniaks, and some have even referred to this as the period of strongest activism in Turkish foreign policy since the Cyprus crisis of 1970s. Turkey still had to maintain a very cautious attitude towards Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, so back in those days, Union of Serbia and Montenegro, because of the importance of Yugoslav territory for Turkish exports to Europe. Now, when it comes to the Kosovo conflict we broke out later on, in that conflict, Ankara had to be much more cautious than in the Bosnian War, primarily because of the analogies between the Kosovo problem and the Kurdish problem, but also because of the Turkish community in Kosovo itself. And during this time, Ankara had some diplomatic overtures towards the government in Belgrade in an attempt to resolve the crisis. But eventually, as a member of NATO alliance, Turkey did take some part in military operation. Now, of course, everything changes with the era of AK Party in Turkey. And of course, during this time, some critics were calling it the neo-Ottomanism, of course, the term that many disliked, but because there was some presence of the Ottoman symbolism in at least the foreign policy discourse. The practice is a much more complicated thing than discourse, but nevertheless, some have referred to this as neo-Ottomanism. And of course, the driving policy maker during this time in Serbo-Turkish ties was, of course, Turkish Kissinger, as he was referred back then. And of course, after first Erdogan's foreign policy advisor, then foreign minister, and then the prime minister Ahmet Davutoglu's and his ideas of strategic depth. When, of course, where on one hand, Davutoglu advocated that Turkey must reactivate its ties with ethnic communities in the Balkans, which have some degree of cultural and emotional proclivity towards Turkey, like Bosniaks and Albanians. But also, Davutoglu nevertheless still believed that Serbia had to be part of the same rubric. And during this time, as some have claimed, some of the most competent Turkish diplomats were engaged in handling Serbian portfolio during this specific time. And of course, this was also the era of the so-called zero problem policy, the idea that Turkey, in order to be effective internationally, it had to resolve all of its disputes in neighboring countries and neighboring regions. And this policy was tested in the Balkans when there was a trilateral mechanism for resolving dispute in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This gathered, of course, Sarajevo, Belgrade, and Ankara, and there was even another initiative which also involved Zagreb. And there was even an attempt by Turkey to mediate between two conflicted Islamic communities in Serbia, one stationed in Belgrade, another stationed in Novi Pazar, in the Serbian province of Sandžak, where a large Bosniak community lives. Now, when President Erdogan told the crowd during his visit in prison in Kosovo 2013, that Turkey is Kosovo and Kosovo is Turkey, this was, in a sense, a breakdown of relations. And Serbia responded to this by withdrawing from a trilateral initiative on Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I think that this became a very, very big problem of Davutoglu's legacy, because he was an intellectual who primarily was very impressed with the historical motives. But as a result of this overly identity-based motives in foreign policy discourse tended to estrange a lot of potential partners for Turkey. Of course, a different stage, I think, happened in both Turkish foreign policy as well as in Serbo-Turkish ties. Following, of course, Prime Minister Davutoglu's resignation in 2016 and a failed coup in Turkey in 2016, I think that from that moment on, Erdogan takes over the helms of Turkish foreign policy, including in the Balkans. And this new phase essentially begins with Erdogan's landmark visit to Belgrade in October 2017. That from that moment on, Serbia becomes very attractive destination for Turkey in terms of investments, and Belgrade-Sarajevo highway is also, which is being developed, has become a key project for Turkey in the Balkans. And I think that the major reason why Turkish foreign policy in the Balkans has been much more successful under President Erdogan rather than Prime Minister Davutoglu is because unlike Davutoglu, who is an intellectual who became a policymaker, Erdogan has always been a practitioner and always been a pragmatist. So this more personalized and transactional foreign policy is something which receives a very, very receptive ear in the Balkans, because there is a certain degree of complementarity between how Erdogan operates and how various individual political leaders in the Balkans operate. Because while in the Western discourse, the transactionalism might be a dirty word because everything is about rules-based order, for Turkey and the Balkan policymakers, a lot of political life and a lot of foreign policy is transactional. So for them, this is not actually a dirty word. So I think that and on that point, I can say that given the problems that Turkey has in the other regions, if we compare the problems in Syria and the Middle East, the instability in the Black Sea, potential conflicts in the Caucasus or Eastern Mediterranean, in compared to it, both Balkans and by extension Serbia appear to be quite a carefree and success story of Turkish foreign policy. And on this point, I think that when it comes to Turkish foreign policy, and this is of course very, very important, I think the Turkish foreign policy in both general terms and in the Balkans has always two components. The one is the so-called emotional components, which is expressed through motifs of common history, identity, cultural kinship, and which can sometimes be even manifested through internal pressures in Turkish domestic politics, which also affects Turkish foreign policy. But the second one is, of course, the pragmatic, realist aspect, which is based on very, very traditional foreign policy realism and something which Turkish foreign policy community understands very well. And I think that two ethnic groups, in a sense, in the Balkans symbolize these two aspects of Turkish foreign policy very, very well. On one hand, when I talked with some of my Turkish colleagues, when I asked them who are the most important countries for you in the Balkans, they frequently replied to me, emotionally Bosniaks, strategically Serbs. But I also think that that Serbs are not the lone party on that one, because I think that Turkey is at this moment in time, I would say, one of the rare players in the Balkans who actually recognizes the strategic reality that Serbs and Albanians are two most consequential ethnic groups in the Balkans. And so whatever you have in store for the Balkans, there has to be some type of equilibrium between the two in order for that initiative to be successful. And so I think that in a sense, Erdogan is frequently has sort of moved away from that idea of trying to be a mediator, because he realized it is a very, very dangerous role. You will be constantly smeared as being in favor of one side or another if you try to be engaged in any mediating activity. I think that the more appropriate description is to be something of a power broker, to maintain parallel contacts, to be able to do business deals with both sides. And I also think that Erdogan and has also realized something else, is that neither Serbs and Albanians are necessarily politically homogeneous groups, that given that these ethnic groups are divided in several countries, there are, of course, different elites representing these two ethnic groups. So, for example, if something doesn't work with Vučić and you need to do business with the Serbs, perhaps you can try your luck with Milorad Dodik in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Republika Srpska. If something doesn't work with Edi Rama in Albania, you can try your luck with the Kosovo Prime Minister. So there is much more flexibility and much more appreciation for the local context and local nuances for this point. I think that we have also seen something of an evolution in Turkish engagement with the Balkans, which of course is also relevant for Serbia, because I think that Turkish foreign policy instruments in the region have also, in a way, evolved. First, Turkey liked to emphasize soft power and public diplomacy. Then, starting with 2017, it became much more focused on this sort of mercantile policy of promoting Turkish businesses and searching opportunities for them in the Balkans. But I think that now Turkey is much more involved in being something of a potential security provider, being much more active in the domain of defense policy. Because I think that one thing that we constantly keep forgetting, unlike Russia and China, Turkey does have a military presence in the Balkans by virtue of its participation in peacekeeping missions, whether it is KFOR in Kosovo or EU's Altea mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it is also, of course, active in the domain of military diplomacy, military education, military training, military donations. And of course, when Turkey sells its weapons, it cannot be susceptible to criticism, because Turkish leaders can say, and I think that it is not inaccurate when they say it, why do you complain about Turkish weaponry? It is NATO standard weaponry. It is not Russian or Chinese weaponry. We are a member of the alliance. Of course, the Turkish Bayraktar drones, I would say, have become something of a quite an impressive achievement for Turkish defense industry. Many are interested in it. Albania and Kosovo got those. Croatia has inked this deal as well. Also, Serbia and Turkey have an agreement on military-industrial cooperation signed back in 2019. And researchers from Turkey's Bolu Abant İzzet Baysal University and researchers from the Serbian University of Niš participate jointly in a project which has been condoned by NATO alliance to develop a system of protection against nuclear attack on NATO border states. But of course, I think that this is also the security policy domain is also something where Turkey is also seeing how difficult it is to maintain this type of balance between local ethnic groups, because we did have something of a small, I won't say crisis, but something of a small pause in Serbo-Turkish relations last year when Serbia said that because of the training that Turkey provides to Kosovo security forces, but more importantly, because of the sale of Bayraktar drones to Pristina, Belgrade is giving up on its plans to open up to buy Bayraktar drones and instead went for kamikaze drones from the UAE. But I also think that what we have seen during the latest visit by President Erdogan is that there has been an evident attempt to repair ties, and there is, I think, awareness in both Belgrade and Ankara about the importance never to fully and permanently close the door to the other side, even when there are disagreements. Among other things, because, and this is also this idea where Turkey can never forget Serbia, actually, that while Turkey can sell its military hardware to other countries in the region, the other countries cannot offer Turkey the military industrial infrastructure that Serbia's defense industry has. So that means that, for example, if you transfer technology and know-how to Serbia, Serbia can develop its own weapon products, but of course, the profit is being shared, and the two countries can also use it to win over third markets jointly. So this is something that others in the Balkans cannot offer to Turkey. So I think that what we see in this, I think what the future brings is that Turkey will, of course, quite naturally and understandably, in my opinion, will try to strengthen its clout whenever it can. But Turkey would even profit significantly from, and this is also something which puts it in a different category compared to Russia, is that Turkey would even support the membership of Serbia and the region in the European Union, both because of the customs union Turkey has with the European Union, but also because that would increase the number of Turkish-friendly countries in the EU. So I think that Turkey can coordinate a lot of its regional policies with the West, and they can say we support EU membership as long as Turkish interests are respected. At the same time, of course, I think that there is a very, very healthy degree of realism here, because I think that Turkey is aware that it has limits of its, is aware of its capacities, but also aware of its limitations, because Turkey is aware that it always has a much more troubling borders in the Middle East, so that always diverts a significant amount of attention and resources. So Turkey has to be rational about how it divides its attention and resources given the multiple regions it is involved. And I think that when it comes to Serbo-Turkish ties and Turkish policy towards the Balkans, I think that even if we have, for example, seen a changing government last year's election, I think that foreign policy is one of the domains of Turkish public policies which would probably experience least changes. Because, I mean, on one hand, as I said, the Balkans remains a carefree domain for Turkish foreign policy. So if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And of course, I think that even the fact that Turkish population of Balkan origins has tried to be slightly more vocal during these elections, and we have even seen many Balkan leaders expressing their support for the electoral bid of President Erdogan, including, for example, the leaders of Bosniaks and Bosniak Serbs, who usually don't agree on much, but actually they both agreed in their endorsement of Erdogan. So for Serbia, Turkey will primarily remain a relevant partner, both in the context of relations with Islamic communities, both in the Balkans and potentially internationally, but also in the context of geographical proximities. And I think the two issues which will make Turkey an important partner for Serbia are potential migration pressure, something to which both Serbia and Turkey will be exposed to in the future, and of course the fact that Turkey will be one of the conduits for the alternative energy infrastructure. So not just Russia, but also potentially gas from Azerbaijan and somewhere else potentially. So I think that that Turkey and Serbia will continue to have friendly relations, but there will also be this agree to disagree element to it as well, because even though the two sides might clash occasionally on issue X, Y, and Z, they may temporarily put their relations in a freezer once this type of disagreements happens, but sooner or later, one side or the other will pick up the phone because neither one of the two sides can afford to alienate the other one in the long term. So that is, I think, my all my points, and I think that this is somewhat of a moderate degree of optimism.
Oh, great, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting to listen all this comprehensive analysis about the Greek, sorry, not Greek, Serbian Turkish relations. I say Greek because I'm an expert about Greek-Turkish relations, so I'm so much used to refer that let's say the couple of this, you know, the relations. That's why. So maybe it is time to ask a few questions. I have some points in my mind. Actually, there are so many things to discuss. But first of all, I want to underline a key point. Maybe it was a little bit apart from your presentation as a result of the frame of the presentation, because we are talking about Turkish-Serbian relations. But of course, we are not free from what's happening around us. Now there is an election result in United States, and everything may have potential to change now, especially with the protectionism, especially economic dimension can be very influential for the rest of the world. And we know that Serbia is a very important address of the Chinese investment, because I remember in the last years, my students were preparing many papers about China-Serbia relations and its rising potential, especially in the economic field. So as a result of the protectionism of Trump, most probably the protectionism, this mercantilist trends will increase everywhere. So what you expect, what you see as a kind of the expectation for the Serbian-Chinese relations in this atmosphere, do you think that the Chinese potential in the Serbian market will increase, or Serbia may move much closer to European markets to be a part of this mercantilist trends, maybe the potential mercantilist trends in politics? Microphone, yeah.
Yes, the microphone, yes. So it is very, very difficult to say how Vučić will depend in this transatlantic rift, for the simple reason that on one hand, the European Union is Serbia's primary economic partner. So that means that when it comes to economics, Europe is in league of its own in the Balkans. So there's one thing, but at the same time, the big problem for Vučić is also that European Union, with this degree of dysfunction in Europe, disunity in Europe, and lack of leverage, which frequently came about as the result of Europe's own inertia. I think that this also creates a problem in which some of the big problems, like, for example, the Kosovo dispute, cannot be resolved without active US participation. And I can tell you, the beginning of November, the first week of November was a very, very good week for Aleksandar Vučić and for Belgrade, because he got Trump in the White House and he got the collapse of Olaf Scholz's government in Germany. And so from his standpoint, he believed that under Trump, he has better chances of extracting some settlement of the Kosovo dispute, which will be easier to sell to his domestic audience. So not a perfect one, not the one in which Serbia is a winner of by any chance, but something which is face-saving settlement, something which Belgrade does not feel humiliated, and something that he can sell to the domestic audience. That was his rationale last time with Trump, and this is again his rationale again. But going forward, the key strategic challenge for Serbia, and I would say that this is probably a key strategic challenge for any country on planet Earth, is how do you navigate and how do you position yourself in the age of Sino-American Cold War? because the Sino-American rivalry will be such a systemic and such a comprehensive and dominant systemic process globally that it is destined to reach even a peripheral country like Serbia. So even a minor countries will not be insulated from this dynamic of Sino-American competition. And so I think that one way or the other, particularly if he wants to do business with Trump, and Trump, we all know how Trump is crazy with China, and Mr. Trump obviously is the jealous lover on this particular point. So I think that as a result of it, Serbia will at one point, if it wants Trump's help, it will have to, if not eliminate all of its ties with China, at least to significantly tone them down. And I think that one potential way in which Serbian leadership might try to achieve this is they will say, for us, China is an economic partner. It is potentially attractive for us in terms of infrastructure, in terms of potential investments. But when it comes to the areas which are strategic to the US, we must tone down our cooperation with China. And these three strategic areas at this moment in time, it appears that they are 5G, strategic raw minerals, and high-tech defense systems. So I think that this is probably the ploy that will be potentially used by the Serbian leadership on this front going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering this question, because it was a little bit out of the scope of today's discussion, but I was really wondering your analysis about that. And another question maybe must be about what are we living today. We are passing through a very difficult time about Ukrainian war, and we started to discuss about any probable nuclear threat of the use of force, I mean, in a nuclear form. So what do you expect in the next days about this, let's say, the Ukrainian war? And because I know that the Balkans had been always a transitionary zone between, the Russia and the European forces, and now the Turkish position is a little bit, the similar maybe. From one perspective, we are trying to find a kind of balance or a way to deal with the problem, maybe not so satisfactory for everybody, but at least not going much into the deeper war. So what do you see in a few months, what kind of appearance we may face in international agenda, and how it may create an impact on maybe the Turkish-Serbian relations?
Yes. Well, I think that on one how I think that we have some couple of very, very ugly months for Ukrainians. I think the decision to give a green light to use of ATACMS missiles is nothing but postponing, but delaying the inevitable. Because I think that the amount of demographic casualties that Ukrainian has suffered means that no amount of no use of long-range missiles or no amount of weapons deliveries will change the course of this war. Now, when it comes to, of course, Turkey itself, it probably, I believe that with President Trump in the White House, President Erdogan might even use it to score a couple of diplomatic and political points by trying to be something as a mediator between President Trump and President Putin, given that he has prided himself of being able to communicate with both of them. When it comes to the Balkans, of course, I do think that I'm not confident. I have never been convinced about the return of full-fledged war in the Balkans. In the Balkans, primarily because I believe that the region is much more deeply embedded in the Western security architecture than before, and I think that these societies don't have neither the demographic nor industrial capacities for prolonged war. So these are aging, demographically hemorrhaging societies. There may be a lot of nationalistic fervors in the media domain and in an online domain, but it's very, very different from whether you are willing to die for the sake of these sentiments, unlike the 1990s. But nevertheless, I would say that in the coming period, the key problem when it comes to not for the prospect of war, but for the prospect of a more localized violence, still remains the north of Kosovo. And so I think that given that the man who had more reasons to be pleased with the outcome of US presidential elections has been Vučić, while the man who had much less reasons to be happy about this was Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti. And so it might very well be possible that Mr. Kurti will try to use these next incomplete 2 months, while until Trump is sworn in to make some move against the North in an attempt to strengthen his position. And so these next 2 months are potentially dangerous on this front. But I think that when it comes to no matter how the Ukrainian war gets resolved, and I think that we, of course, even in the maximalist account of this war, which means that Russia triumphs not in a way that just cements its control over Donbass, but potentially decides to go for the Odessa as well. And of course, being you in Turkey know this, Russia, which controls Odessa alongside Crimea, it is no longer just Russian primacy in the Black Sea, it is also Russia's monopoly in the Black Sea going after that one. But I think that even if the maximalistic triumph of Russia does take place in Ukraine, I think it will have very, very little implications for the Balkans, because I think that in the case of a smaller country like Serbia, global geopolitics might be a little bit overrated. In the case of a small country like Serbia, regional geopolitics is much more important than the global geopolitics. And if we take a look, even if Russia does triumph in that type of way in Ukraine, the regional security order in Southeastern Europe will not change that much as a result of war. NATO and the European Union will still be everywhere. The local capitals will still be, even those who are unhappy with the European Union will still be courting Donald Trump to help them resolve their problems. And the European Union will still be the primary economic partner. The thing which might change most probably as a result of Russian win in Ukrainian conflict is not in the domain of geopolitics, but I would say that it is a triumph in the soft power domain. Because I kept saying, including at some of the gatherings where we have jointly participated, the Russian challenge in the Balkans is not a military challenge because Russia has no boots on the ground. It is not an economic challenge because Russia cannot match, except from gas supply, it cannot match the Europeans. Russian challenge in the Balkan is on the playing field of competition for hearts and minds, because Russia has been able to assert itself as a psychological symbol for all of those parts of the local population which are unhappy with the West. Sometimes these grievances can be real and even justified. Sometimes they can be perceived and far-fetched. But Russia is this symbol through which you vent out your frustration. So in case Russia does triumph, and particularly if it triumphs in a convincing fashion, which, as I said, in this case involves reaching Odessa, that Russian geopolitical clout in the Balkans might not increase, but its soft power allure and political prestige certainly would.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Maybe Ezgi Betül may have question. Do you have any question, Ezgi? If not, maybe we would like to say thank you for your presentation, Ezgi.
Thank you for your talk. It enlightened me on so many subjects. Thank you for both of you for today.
Thank you for your attendance. So it was very interesting presentation. It was an honor to host you. I hope to host you again in our further activities. Thanks for your attendance.
Thank you. So I mean, whenever I was happy to do this, and if you're happy, I'm happy as well.
We are more than happy. I'm sure it will be the beginning of a good cooperation path in future. Thanks again. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.